Awesome.
Um, so the question is, now I talk for my colleagues, yeah, what do you have any thoughts about it? So what to introduce, when to introduce, how to introduce? This is enormous
So many
question, of
thoughts.
course. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But
So many thoughts. Um,
let's say let's say some thoughts she can
yeah,
easily implement without.
totally.
Yeah.
Totally. So, okay. A lot of ideas here. So, you asked me earlier to think about what I would do differently if I had to write the book again. And I think this ties into that because one of the biggest things that I understand now that I didn't fully appreciate when I was writing the book is the different levels we have to approach this problem with, right? So the individual level is kind of the most obvious, right? It's what goes on inside me. The team level is the next most obvious. And then we're talking about really like, sometimes crew resource management or teamwork under pressure. And then the systems level is kind of the least obvious. And that's actually what we've spent most of our time on this call talking about is the cultural aspects of things. But I think that you have to introduce those levels early. You have to say, look, some of what we can teach you is managing yourself. Some of this you're not going to be able to touch yet because you're looking at teams and you're looking at cultures. But I want you to be aware of it because when you see it go right or wrong, I want you to think to yourself, oh, okay, it's actually this culture that's setting up this particular thing that's happening here. And part of my job and my career is going to be to bend that. Right. So when I was a medical student, I came up in the era when it was still basically okay to scream at medical students on a pretty regular basis, right? Like there was the era when it was okay to throw things at them, and I missed that, but I was still in the scream at them era. So, I remember being a student and just an outrageous number of words that I won't repeat on this conversation being yelled at me about what a disgrace to medicine I was, right? And like it's hard to not internalize that a little bit.
Yeah.
So one thing that I see juniors struggling with is they come in, they don't perform how they want to because they're not going to. They don't have the skills yet to do it,
Yes.
right? And they look at that gap and they say, "Wow, I'm a bad person. I'm terrible. My mom hates me. I'm the worst doctor in the universe. I should just quit." And they internalize all of this shit. And then you have to go unbuild that later, right? And so I think one thing I would love to do differently is to teach this approach at the beginning and say, look, there's stuff in your control, there's stuff out of your control, there's all these things going on. You're going to see this gap between what you want to do and what you can do. And when you see it, I want you to call it out. I want you to say, this is a gap and ask, do I think this gap is because of a skill I have on an individual level that I should get better at? Do I think this gap is a teamwork problem that I can sort of approach? Do I think this gap is a cultural thing that it's going to take some changes to build in there? Maybe it's all three. But if you can start that conversation from a point of curiosity and experiment, as opposed to a point of, I'm a terrible human being, that's a sea change,
Yeah.
right? That's an ability to really alter what
Yeah.
these folks are going through from the very beginning. So we've started doing that on my end of stuff with medical students and with all of the ER doctors get me basically week one to come in and be like, this is what it's going to feel like. When you feel this, your only job is to note that you're feeling it.
Mm.
That's cool. We'll get you there. Right. I just want to not make you worse at the beginning and
Yes.
help arm you with some structure around that.
Yeah.
Um, I think the counterpoint to that is that you have to start training the teachers also. You can't just work with the students, right? If you get students that are coming out being like, well, Dan and Eric say I'm a fundamentally good person that should be, working on performance, but this guy's telling me I'm, the grime under his shoe. That's a bit of a mismatch, right? So you have to
Yes.
work on the trainers too and be like, look, I don't care that this is what you got when you came up.
Yeah.
It's not enough to.
It's not enough to.
I think we all froze there. It's not
Yeah.
enough. It's not enough to say. It's not enough to as a teacher to look at a student. It's not enough to be like, you suck, suck less. Right? You have to actually teach, and you have to actually want to teach. So you got to work at it from two angles. You got to work at the students. You got to work at the faculty at the same time.
Yes. And would you also, of where at the curriculum would you like to introduce, for example, the self-regulation strategies? Like
Oh
for
yeah,
example, breathing, whatever,
totally. As early as possible.
early as
Right?
possible.
Yeah, I think so, because you know, you might not have the depth of experience about having felt it yourself, but if you teach them this from the beginning,
Yeah.
then at least they have a framework to understand. Then you can go upgrade it later.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, like, how do we teach medicine? Right? How do we teach anything? We teach basic structures, and then afterwards we're like, well, actually it looks more like this. Well, actually it looks more like this. Right?
Yes.
We're sort of upgrading as we keep going. Right? So what are the courses what are the courses that you have as a first year student in this curriculum, right? You probably have some version of anatomy and physiology,
Yes.
right? So why not teach some of these components along with anatomy and physiology, right? Here's the stress response system from an anatomical and physiological point of view.
Yeah.
By the way, we're talking about modifying anatomy and physiology. We're going to talk about modifying the stress response as we do it. We're going to make this a normal part of our conversation and a part of our education.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know any medical schools that do that. I'd love to see it.
Yeah. But
But
why is it? Why do you have any clue about it?
okay, so this is a completely unfounded theory, but here's my theory, right? I think that there's this sense that um, performance under pressure is a thing that you pick up accidentally from showing up at work.
Hmm.
It's the expectation that that's how they did it, so that's how you should do it too.
Yeah.
Right? You just accidentally show up. And if that were true, then the oldest doctors would always be the best under pressure. And they are not.
No.
Right? That's just not how it works.
No.
Some of them are amazing, right? Some of
Yeah,
them
yeah,
are
yeah.
absolutely amazing, but that's just not how it works, right? So if that's not true, then we got to throw that theory out,
Yeah.
right? Time on target is necessary but not sufficient to develop expertise.
Yes.
You got to show up, but you can't just show up. You got to show up intelligently.
Yeah.
So that's my guess is that we are inheriting a system that believed that you would produce this by accident.
Yeah. Yeah, by accident, by luck, also in the police. If you were lucky, you had an older officer who taught you something, but a lot of times you were not so lucky.
Yeah, and I am incredibly fortunate. I had an amazing variety of people that came before me that I am on the shoulders of giants to be thinking about any of these things,
Yeah.
right? But it shouldn't rely on that.
No. Well, I think this is a great last words.
Absolutely.
I will tell it to the hospital so they have inspiration to go further. Yeah, thank you so much for this talk already, and hope to speak to you again then.
My pleasure, man.
And
Absolutely. It's great to talk to you, and please let's do this again, and tell the hospital to email me. I'd love to talk to them.
thank you so
Yeah.
much. Have a nice day.